Welcome to another conversation in the Pleasure In series. And today I'm so excited to welcome my friend Haley Reese to talk about pleasure in food and cooking. And so I see Haley has just joined us. I'll just wait for her to request and then I'll accept. But today I'm really so excited about talking about finding pleasure in food and cooking. Personally, I find a lot of pleasure in food, but not so much in cooking. So I'm really excited to speak to Haley about this and about how she helps folks, to reprogram their relationship with food and with eating and with cooking so that they can find more pleasure, more presence, more ease, and more joy in the process. So Haley, there should be a button somewhere that says request to join, because I'm not seeing it pop up on my side yet. So I'll just give it a second. There we go. Yeah, there we go.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, your background is giving me so much pleasure already. Welcome.
I'm so
I was just giving you a little intro and saying how I'm so excited to talk to you about these topics today, because I find a lot of joy in eating, not so much in cooking, which I'm sure is not that unusual. So yeah, Haley, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work to begin.
yeah, absolutely. And thank you just so much. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. I have been a coach for the last probably going on 7 years now. And for a lot of that time, I've really focused on mental health and happiness, specifically helping people with depression and anxiety, because that's a lot of, it is my own personal journey of overcoming, really struggling with that early on in like adolescence and high school, college, all of that. And alongside of coaching the whole time, I've been pursuing this passion of just food and cooking and creating new recipes. And it's always been like probably my number one hobby. I can remember back to when I was like 5 years old, like learning how to make muffins with my grandma. And like my mom, like, thank goodness for her, put a lot of we had like restrictions around how much like TV and electronics we could play with after school. So I was really forced to be creative. And so a lot of the time, like that would just come out in food and cooking. And recently I've been really kind of bringing together those two areas of focus that I have of like mental health. Kind of how food and cooking have helped create so much joy and happiness in my own life and brought so much peace and helped me in times that I'm anxious, and just like brought this really beautiful, like fun, pleasurable area of my life, no matter what else has been going on. And so that's really the direction I'm taking things in now. And I'm like so excited about it because it's like, it's just my truest self. It's like my truest essence.
Yeah. Oh, I can feel that. And having heard you recently speak about this topic more and more, I can feel that sense of joy and flow coming through you as you speak about this. And it really does feel like it is your truest essence. And like this work is actually in your area of pleasure as well. Like this is pleasure to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that actually brings me to my next question, which is, what is pleasure to you? How do you define pleasure?
Yeah. So for me, I think of pleasure as like the way that we soak up the most enjoyment from life, like the way that we really we're given, which is our bodies and our eyes and our ears and our mouths and our taste buds, and like truly indulge in like all the five senses to just soak up like the present moment and to like be in the present moment and to moment in just a live way and the like juiciest way and the most fun way. And obviously life isn't always, you know, juicy and fun and easeful and pleasurable, but I really do believe that like even in like because I've been thinking about, you know, the last year, a lot of us went through, I mean, we all went through the pandemic, but
Yeah.
because the pandemic or alongside that, like went through like grief and went through sorrow and went through loss. And for me, like even in the midst of all of that, food was still something and cooking was still something that could bring those like droplets of joy and pleasure into my everyday. So I find it like food and cooking as like a natural like portal into more pleasure in our lives. It's like we have to eat. Why not take even more enjoyment from it? Why not let it be even more fun? Why not let it like be a way to really nourish ourselves and like love on ourselves and honor ourselves?
Mm, yeah, that that sounds to me like it's like this idea that I've been playing around with recently, like of orgasmic living is like just like opening yourself up to like whatever sense can be stimulated, like whatever you can find pleasure, sensual pleasure, soothing pleasure, nourishing pleasure in. And I really love your description of pleasure, bringing in all the senses and then also being present. To me, that's pretty similar to my definition actually too. And yeah, I just think it's like right now in this moment, that idea makes so much sense to me. But it's never been something before that has made sense to me, or that I've seen that way. I guess I've never seen cooking as that portal. I think it's, and just speaking from my like personal history, I think food has always been so fraught with, you know, diet culture and hating myself and shame and all of that, and then also like using food as a tool to numb out as well. So it's taken me a long time to reprogram that relationship to food to a healthier place. But I think cooking has just not caught up with that yet. And I think I'd love to ask you about what has been perhaps in your own life like a block or an obstacle to finding pleasure in food and in cooking.
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. I also have to say, like, I relate so much to what you just shared about your own journey with food. Like, I could have probably word for word shared something very similar about my own as well. And I mean, I think as women, it's just like there's so many expectations put on us. There's so many like shoulds and ways we're supposed to look and be in the world. And food is such an entangled part of that that it can be really tricky to like kind of separate out all of those things and then recreate or rebuild a relationship with food that is nourishing and joyful and pleasurable and not like fraught with all of that pain and
Mm-hmm.
suffering. So I love that you brought that up. And for me, one of my other, like when you said that, the first thing that came to mind is like one of my other sort of blocks that I had specifically with cooking for a long time was like my perfectionist self trying to come in, especially in the early days when I was just kind of getting a bit more serious about cooking.
Mm-hmm.
I put so much pressure on myself to like get it right and have things turn out amazing, first time I ever made them, even if I was like throwing something together out of thin air, I would just like be really hard on myself if I, messed it up or it didn't turn out right. But the really beautiful thing, and I was thinking about this earlier today as I was getting ready for our conversation, just like thinking about what we're going to chat about, is like what I realized with cooking and just, I think food, and really I think it speaks to our lives, our creations, everything in general, is that like it's really your perspective so much of the time on like how you look at the cooking process or how you even look at the end result, that you kind of have a choice to choose to label it as like, I did this well, or I messed this up. And any one person can look at the same end result and have a different opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think back to when I was younger and going back to, crafting that I had to do, not had to, but chose to do as my after school activities. Like I used to love, like, and I still do, like, love art and painting and like drawing and all these things. And again, I used to think like, oh, if I accidentally messed up that line or messed up that brush stroke, that the whole thing was ruined. And then I evolved and I started realizing like, okay, that wasn't what I had planned or what I had hoped for, or what I intended, but how can I make it something different and beautiful and unexpected even to me? And I find food and cooking to be really similar. And when I started bringing that sort of like permission that it doesn't have to be perfect, that it doesn't have to even turn out like I had hoped or expected, that I can just like bring that fun and creativity and like whatever direction the dish or the evening or the plan pull me in, I started having so much more fun, like way more pleasure with the process. And that really has been a game changer. And not to say that like I don't mess things up ever, because I totally do, but I don't beat myself up the way that I used to about it. And I try to look at it more so as like, how can this be an opportunity to create something like brand new and different that couldn't have happened otherwise?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's so great. I love how you've compared it to like the creative process. I think it's like there's like a certain level of like, I guess, objectivity, like, wow, that's an amazing painting. Like a lot of people would probably agree, but then you'll always find some people are like, no, it's shit. I don't see it. And I think I love that, like in terms of food and cooking and just giving that sort of permission to hold like a broader perspective and to realize that like it's so much more about the process and being curious and staying open. And yeah, I think I was so engrossed in what you were saying, and I was like, yes, it's exactly like creativity. And then suddenly it just popped into my head. I was like, yes, and it's like sex too. Like, I was like, oh yeah, it's the same. It's the same principle. And then to my brain, that makes a lot of sense because I'm like, there's no thing like, perfect sex. And it's when we get caught up on that we either avoid it or don't enjoy it. And from that perspective, I can really see how that applies to cooking as well. And it is this creative process, just like making art is, just like making love is. It's like all really this opportunity to play, be creative, and connect with ourselves, the food, someone else. Yeah, and I think as you were speaking, I was thinking it's funny because I wouldn't say that what's held me back is perfectionism. But maybe it is like a flavor of it. I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I'm your ideal client because I'm just like, no, I don't, like, tell me about this cooking thing. I don't get it. So, I think with cooking for me, I sort of had this thing of like, it's not my zone of genius. I'm just not good at it. So actually it's a waste of my time then. And I should outsource this to someone who's better at it. And it's this very functional thing. And so if like I'm not really that good at it, like I should just outsource it to someone else. And I'd love to know what you think about that or have to say about that.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I mean, I definitely do that for a lot of things in my life too. And I think it kind of, I mean, for some reason, all the things that we're talking about today remind me of like various childhood things. I mean, that's pretty surprising, but that reminds me of like when I was in third grade or something, like I was literally told by a teacher that I wasn't good at math. And from that moment forward, I had this just core belief that was like almost a part of my identity where I'm like, I'm not good at math, so why try? Like, if I'm just not going to be good at it, it's not going to turn out well. Why even bother? Like, what's the point? I should just use a calculator, use
Yeah.
Google, use really good at math, whatever. Like, I'm just not going to even try to be good at it. And so I love that you brought that up because it reminded me of that experience in life. And I realized, you know, now being a coach and an adult and looking back and realizing like that was one person's opinion. And I was, I think, too young to be told like that you just aren't good at math. I think I had plenty of time to develop that skill. And I think cooking is really similar too. It's like, to your point, you know, if we just believe we're not good at something, it can be really discouraging to like want to even try to engage with it. And so my, I guess, invitation to you and anyone listening who feels similarly, whether it's about cooking or food or anything, like if you feel like you hold that label of like, well, I'm just not good at this, so I'm just not going to try, to just like invite you to examine it a little bit and see like, is that like, how true is that really? Because my guess would be that like if you wanted to create something that you surely could, like you, I have zero doubt that you're beyond capable. And then it's more just that like shifting, you know, what is my relationship to it? Like, what is my relationship to cooking, or what's my relationship to math? Like,
Yeah.
still kind of outsourcing math, but it's more like, how can, if it is something that you want to, and then like, I think the first step is like looking at that belief system around it. And then the next, like, just being willing to experiment, like being willing to like do it just for fun with no pressure, no expectation on it, just to do something loving and beautiful and exciting for yourself, is kind of my favorite way to help people shift into enjoying cooking. Is like, let's pick something that just sounds super fun and starting maybe with something that sounds super simple and super easy. And with food, so often like the things that are actually like really simple, like not a lot of ingredients, not a lot of technique required, are some of the things that turn out like the most beautifully, that you can have the most fun with, that you can be the most creative with, that you can like really bring in your own flavor and your own spark to. So that's, yeah, to kind of answer your question and like the prompting, like that's kind of how I started thinking about it, and how I sort of help people think about it too, is like knowing that, I mean, we're all beyond capable, and it's just like the deciding to let go of like the labels that we've put on ourselves or the beliefs that we've chosen, and then opening up to like, how can this be the most fun and exciting and pleasurable thing possible, instead of like it being a to-do or a chore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the, like, that really, really resonates with me when you speak about sort of looking at like turning away from those labels, being willing, being open, and then really thinking about how can you make this more fun, and let it be like this creative thing that you do for yourself. And I think, I don't know why, but I just never thought about it that way. Like, I think there's also like, there's this sort of inherent uh like labor aspect that I think of with cooking. Like, it's like the women need to be in the kitchen cooking and the men get to be out there having fun. Like, I think that, like, I've never thought about that part of it before, but there's some part of me, I think, that rebels against that. And so I actually take that opportunity away from myself to see it as an opportunity that, like, this isn't for anyone else, this is for me. And just really had that in this moment, like really thinking about that and realizing, is that something that you've heard people say before, or what are your thoughts on that? Because I've never even thought about that before, but I've realized that's a lot of my resistance.
Oh, so much sense. I mean, especially I think in like, the coaching and women's empowerment communities that we're in, there's definitely that element of like, I'm not trying to like live in those super traditional, outdated roles. Because these days, I mean, women, it's not like, way back when women were maybe in the kitchen because it's like the men were out working and the women are taking care of the household. And then it turned into like the women were in the working world and still taking full care of the household. And now we're just like, hey, this is not like balanced or equitable in any way. I'm just as hard as you, and like, let's have some sharing of responsibilities here. And I so see that perspective of like, I don't want to put that labor on myself as a woman. I want to like have some independence from the kitchen, from like the home base, and not be seen as like, oh, that's my position. Because we're gonna decide, like, we don't have to have any position. We get to decide our position. And I think that like you bringing that up is gonna like, I imagine that resonates with so many people. I know what resonates for me is that I've always loved the cooking part. I love the like creating the food and doing like beautifying the table and hosting people for meals. What I don't love about those are like, I don't want to do it all. I don't want to like cook all the food and then clean up everything. So like a way that I kind of have worked that out in a lot of my relationships or with friends or whoever I'm throwing those events with is like, okay, I'm down to do all the cooking and then you can do all the cleaning. And like my husband and I have that partnership in our home where whoever cooks, the other person cleans. And so it feels really like balanced. And that's how I've personally sort of solved for that, where I'm not like, oh, my domain is the kitchen in that like outdated patriarchal way.
I love that. And I think that it always comes back to choice, right? Like that's the crux of feminism as well, is like that we should be able to choose. And sometimes what I'm noticing is these reactive patterns, like in me, in this particular case, is actually taking me further from choice, because now I'm basically saying, I won't do that because I don't want it to be an expectation, but I'm not choosing for myself, like, do I actually like that? Would that be fun? I'm just like, no, I'm taking a stand. And I think that's so beautiful, like just bringing the sense of curiosity, like how can we make this, even the process, like the whole process, like who's cleaning, who's responsible for the shopping, like all of that, how can we make that be more creative with it? Like we can do anything at this point, like we're all capable adults, and if you're willing and if your partner's willing to work with you, like I think there is so much room for creativity and play. And I just think opening up our eyes to this idea that cooking can be something for yourself, and it can be like really fun and pleasurable, and simple. And I love how you bring in the word ease as well. And so you've touched on that. Like I think you've said, like, sometimes the most simple things can be the most fun and the most delicious. And I'd just love to hear you talk about that ease aspect a little bit more. Like, what do you do to make cooking more easeful, and what do you not do? Anything around that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I was thinking the other day how for me, so much of the ease in cooking actually is kind of created through the pleasure that it's like, I think, in a lot of the circles we're in, where it's like the ease in business comes from having more pleasure in business. And I think it's very cooking, where it's like the more fun, the more joy that you can infuse into that experience, the more easeful it's going to feel. If you're feeling like it's something you have to do and you're like rushed to do it, and you're making something that doesn't light you up or isn't enjoyable to you, or you're doing like a cooking technique or process that you just really hate doing, I think that kind of saps it of ease and of the pleasure. But for me, it's like I'll bring in ease just by like putting on some like music that I really enjoy. I often listen to like kind of summer jazz music, just like very interesting kind of background jazz music. Or other times it's like, I don't know, just other fun songs that are, I'm kind of like dancing as I cook and bringing in that. And for me too, it's through like picking dishes that I know I'm going to really love the end result of. And then just seeing like, how can I just let the process be as easy as possible, even if it's a more complex recipe or there's lots of components. And it's kind of this process, I think, just like it is with, I'd say, kind of pleasure in anything, of like checking in with yourself and being really present in the moment, and checking in moment to see like if you start to feel a little off, if you start to feel a little stressed, if it starts to feel overwhelming, just be like, what's really going on here? And that kind of, for me at least, connects back to the perfectionism. Usually for myself, when I'm like putting too much pressure on the outcome, when I'm really forcing it to be a certain way, and I'm like getting really stressed if like, oh, I didn't dice that properly. It's like, is that really going to matter? Like, is it really going to change like the lovely flavors? Most of the time, not. And so just like having that little mini check-in as I'm going to be like, ooh, if I'm feeling a little like icky around something, if it's something not feeling so joyful, just like what's actually going on there, and how can I just make a super small, subtle shift? Most of the time it's just like in my perspective, and like I have to just tell myself something new, like tell myself like, Haley, you're literally just cooking for yourself, or like you're literally just cooking for your husband, and he loves everything that you make, and he's going to tell you it's amazing. Like, you don't need to worry about this. Like, let it be fun, let it be. And that can honestly make such a difference to me, and like really bring in that sense of ease. And so I think like I like to kind of differentiate. Some people might not love to like hear this definition of it, but it's like, for me, is when it comes to cooking, again, isn't about like never cooking really complex or making like, my friends, like some of my like culinary inclined friends, I like to throw like dinner parties, or like make these like multi-course dinners that we kind of try to we do this like swap where we pretend like we're at like a 5-star San Francisco restaurant, and like multiple courses paired with drinks or wine or whatever, and it's a big production, like it's a work. It usually is like my whole weekend with shopping, cooking, and everything. So it's not about not like doing anything, but it's like, how can I just make the process as enjoyable as possible? So that might mean like creating more spaciousness around the time that you have to cook. Or if you don't have time, picking something that is easier, or that doesn't require you to run to the store, or doesn't require you to add more to your plate if you're already feeling stressed, and just doing something like simple and delightful. So ease can mean so many different things, but it's not always just about like an easy recipe or an easy technique. So it can be. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I say that after everything you say. I'm like, yes. Yeah, I think, to me, I definitely agree with you on ease not meaning necessarily easy, um, but really bringing pleasure to the process is what makes it feel easeful.
Yeah.
And when you spoke about bringing like music into it, and then of course it's in and of itself, it's very sensual. Cooking can be very sensual, like the smells, the textures, looking at everything. It can be like meditative almost.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you say that. I don't want to interrupt what you're saying,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I I wanted to touch on that actually because especially like I mean so many of us are working on computers all day every day. You're just glued to a screen. So I've really loved lately like having cooking, whether it's just like preparing a lunch or if it's like full on cooking like a dinner at the end of the day. It's my like restoration. It's like a break screens from like being in front of my computer all day. Granted, actually, one of the ways I bring in ease and pleasure to cooking sometimes is like watching a favorite TV show or like watching a movie while I'm cooking, because that's just like another fun way to
Yeah.
enjoy it. It can be, it's just like you're so focused in on what you're creating and you're like reading the recipe, making sure you have the right ingredients, like cutting things properly, stirring things in at the right time. I find I have generally like very little capacity to like really get too deep into thinking about something else. And so
Mm.
that's where it feels like this true moment of like restoration because I'm just like singularly focused on what's in front of me in the present moment. And I generally feel like kind of that revitalization that I think a lot of us actually look to for food. Like you were saying earlier, with food, we can like use it to numb out, we can use it to bring up our energy. Like I know when I was working in recruiting, I used to like have like 3 p.m. chocolate break. And like there
Mhm.
are other ways for that, but like cooking can be a way to kind of like really bring in that vitality that I think a lot of us seek, or that restoration, or that like relaxation. So I had to touch on that because I love that you said it's kind of like a meditation because that's really how I see it too.
Yeah, yeah. There's like when you, and I have tried to practice this, and when I've done it, the few times I've done it, it's really made such a big difference to me. Like just focusing on this one leek in front of me and just chopping it and just looking at the colors and feeling the way the knife feels when it like cuts in and out of it. Like this, that is meditating. Like it's basically just not getting caught up in your thoughts. And I
Yeah.
think it's, oh, there's so much I want to say about everything you've just shared. But I think I'll stick to two things. The one is that, again, everything you've just shared makes so much sense to me when I think of it through the lens of sexuality and sexual pleasure. Then I'm like, oh, of course. It makes so much sense. Like bringing in your senses. So often with my clients, that's part of like reconnecting back to their pleasure, is bringing sensual pleasure into sexuality. So smells, sounds, tastes, and really resensitizing ourselves through our senses to what pleasure actually feels like. And it's almost like this is, I can just see the overlap in that so much. And at the same time, when you were speaking about not being so outcomes focused, in my work, when I speak about the outcome is always an orgasm, right? Like when people get hung up on the outcome of like, I need to have an orgasm and it needs to be like this and I need to look this way while I'm having it, that's what's that's like what saps all the joy, all the pleasure out of it. And it's when we can make that shift, and as you said, like check in with yourself, like what's coming up, why am I starting to feel out of my body, or like I'm feeling just like icky, or something's just not feeling great right now in this moment. Like checking in, okay, oh, it's because it's perfectionism, oh, because it's shame, oh, because it's whatever. And then just, okay, that's okay. What would I rather choose to believe in that moment? Like what new thought can I just put in, or how can I just let go of the thoughts and come back to the sensuality of the moment, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like just I was just when I think of it that way, it just makes so much. I don't know why I have to think of it like through sexuality, but then it makes so much sense to me. And yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is just around that like restoration and stepping away from your computer. I'm a very big proponent of ritual and having more rituals in our day. It's something that we've culturally moved away from so much. And I think that as humans, we have a primal need for ritual and ceremony and things that are sort of set apart from the everyday. And there's a very deep part of us that connects to like the symbols and the sort of practices or steps that go along with rituals. And I think that viewing cooking and eating as a ritual in your day, and as really a pleasure ritual, and as something that you're devoted to, I can really see how that could change it away from this perspective of it's just something on your to-do list and it's something you do for other people and all of
Mm.
that I personally have struggled with, and really turn it into like a devotion to life, a devotion to pleasure, to yourself. um, yeah. Do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I I just like everything that you say and reflect back is like core of the things that like I believe that food and cooking can be, and why I'm moving like in this direction more and more, because yeah, cooking is like that's one of the biggest like devotions that I have to myself and my body. And I absolutely like ritual is a huge part of my life in the like little everyday ways. Like I've been noticing more and more how I'm not necessarily like a consistent person with a lot of things. Like I'm not super regimented or scheduled in any way. I'm very like free flowing, but there's still like certain practices that I bring into my almost every day. Like I do some sort of movement. I usually do sort of like feeling my feelings and like emotional releases. I do some sort of, like food devotion type of thing, most of the time through cooking. But otherwise, it's just like if I have, because I totally love to order out, I love to go to restaurants, like whatever it is, it's like that just brings so much joy to my day. And I really bring my own sort of sense of like reverence to that moment, because it's whether I'm eating on my own or eating with a loved one. If I'm eating with a loved one, like it's a chance to connect. It's a chance to like be delighted by what's in front of us. It's a chance to talk about things that we might not ordinarily talk about as we like, pass each other in the house during the day, or like if you see a friend out on the street, like, and you're passing by, it's really like it's a chance to like go even deeper into life, I guess, like to just put it kind of broadly, but simply, but truthfully too.
Really truthfully. Mm,
Just like
yeah.
like,
Yeah, and I think just by its very nature, or yeah, in cooking and working with ingredients, there's usually some aspect of like plant life that you're involved with as well. And I think that's like what so many of us are missing from our everyday, is that connection to nature. And that's definitely a massive thing for me. I live in a very big city, and it's when I'm not connected to nature in some way in my everyday, even without going outside, but if I can at least see a
yeah,
beautiful sunset or see some water or trees, that is really important to me. And I think I'm just realizing that cooking and food can be a form of connection to nature as well, especially if you're working with beautiful natural ingredients. That's literally something that the earth has produced for us. So yeah, I think just even bringing that into it makes me realize that there's so much more here to play with than I realized before.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so I think that connection that you made, it's like bringing nature inside. Like cooking can just be a way to bring it like to our table, to our indoors. And I wonder, like as the pandemic is likely winding down, I think so many of us are so excited to reconnect to nature. We've been kind of cooped up. I know for me, like cooking and food became such a huge part of the way I sort of supported my mental health, my emotional wellness, like my joy all throughout the pandemic. It was like, oh, there's this like delightful thing in front of me that I get to really enjoy and just like really indulge in and have this beautiful moment with, even while all the awful things are happening, like outside of my um so yeah, I think it's like this beautiful way to bring nature in. And the other thing I just kind of wanted to mention on that note, like I've always been just like omnivore. I eat everything. I'm like the least picky eater. There's maybe 5 foods that I don't particularly enjoy. Um, Other than that, like I've never strived to identify with one specific way of eating. But for the last, I think like 2 weeks, we've been just playing with this. Like, I've been following this company called Sakara that does these like health and wellness kind of like meal plans. It's like food delivery, but they have some like other products as well. And I'd always wanted to try like their food delivery, but it was just like, it's for a future time in my life. And then they came out with this like 10-day reset where they gave you a booklet of like recipes and like other elements to the reset, but it's all plant-based and vegan and just like all really delicious whole foods. And I honestly have been someone who was like, I could never be vegan. I'm dairy intolerant, but like cheese is still my favorite food and I find a way to make it work. Like like I'm not giving up cheese, but
Cheese is the thing that holds me back. Yeah.
Truly, I'm like, can't give up cheese. But doing this, even just like experimenting with this like 10 days of like plant-based eating, it opened up my eyes to like, wow, like just what beautiful things can be made so simply with like our whole foods. And it just expanded like what was possible to me in this really cool way where I now just feel so inspired to like bring more and more like, you know, non like meat free dishes and recipes into my own cooking. Because before that was actually sort of a block that I held for myself, was like, I don't know how to cook something without like meat being a core component. Because at least like in America and the way, you know, that I sort of grew up, it's like meat, potatoes, maybe a vegetable, you know, like that's
I grew
the
up exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yeah. 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 That's so funny. So I grew up in South Africa and the culture there is like meat obsessed. I mean, like our, like a very big, at least in like my heritage, like a big, very big part of our national pastime is like, it's called braaiing, but it's barbecue essentially. And it's just like raw meat on the fire, smoke. And like, it's so, and actually, I'm so happy you bring this up because when I moved to Vietnam, very quickly became vegetarian, actually, or pescatarian. And that, firstly, that was just like blew my mind because I was obsessed with meat in South Africa. And I always said, like, I never got it. And I was almost like an anti-vegetarian because I was just like, it's not a real meal if there's no meat. That was literally me. So for various reasons I won't get into, I became vegetarian in Vietnam or pescatarian, and I have been now for almost 4 years. And that shift, I think, was actually when I lost a lot of my confidence in cooking because I knew how to cook meat-based meals, but without that, like I basically just ended up eating like carbs and starch all of the time. And then, you know, I was also in a new country, like a lot of the products aren't what I'm used to. And it's really, that has been a massive block for me, like figuring out new ways to eat without meat. And yeah, I think like what I'm realizing is like there are still vegetables everywhere. Like vegetables are universal. So if I focus more on that, and I'm sure like there are many, many beautiful meals I can make that are more plant-based and are probably way better for my body as well, like in terms of nourishment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really something that I'm just so passionate about how people learn. Because my like OG coaching background is that I was first certified as a transformational nutrition coach through ITN, which I know a lot of people have gone through IIN, but ITN was like a similar but different kind of school in that realm. And so, you know, I really had all of that knowledge and information about like ways to eat healthy, ways to nourish your body. And for me, the biggest thing has always been like eating healthy can't be boring and it can't taste bad. Like if it does, I'm not going to do it. You know? And I think that's a block that I've heard a lot of my clients like share with me is like, I want to eat healthy, but I don't know how to like whole foods in a way that's like fun or easy or it ends up tasting good. It's like I can do like these three things with like a carrot and a broccoli and like a head of lettuce and like kind of stumped after that. And so that's where my whole approach to cooking has, I mean, my approach has developed from like all these different areas in my life. It's like part growing up and grandma's influence, part just like me looking at books and like making things, part me just experimenting with things, like part I went to culinary school for a semester. So it's like this conglomeration of all these different influences from my life. But at the core of it for me is like the creativity aspect and the like just learning how to cook in a very intuitive way that really just goes hand in hand with eating intuitively. It's like listening and learning to what your body really wants and what it desires and what would feel really good and nourishing, and then using cooking as a way to like deliver that to yourself. But I think it's that core piece that I really like to help people with, of like knowing you can't be a creative chef. You can like develop that skill, and it's like putting really small simple building blocks into place and then just like building on top of that as you go, like knowing that you don't have to start out and like be a Michelin star chef tomorrow morning. It's just like, how can you really listen to your desires and then create food from that place?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you're speaking my language when you're speaking about desire and like following your desire. And I think that's something that's also gotten completely convoluted and turned backwards on itself through diet culture. Is like you never listen to the desires of your body, right? Like that is the thing you ignore above all else. So it is such a powerful reclamation to connect back to what your body actually wants. And I think, yeah, what would you say about, I know, oh, this will be the last question because I know we're coming up on time and I could talk about this all day. But what would you say about, so when I think about like what my body desires to eat, I'm like sugar, above all else, it's sugar. It just, that's what it wants, right? So it's like, but I know, like, no, your body doesn't really, really want that. So when it comes to like intuitive eating and listening to your body, how do you differentiate, or like how do you play with that? Like my body just really wants yesterday, my body really wanted a piece of coffee cake. So like that, there's that. And my body often doesn't want vegetables. Like it's not like a call that I hear. Let's put it like that. So what would you say about anything around that in like intuitive eating and how to navigate that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you asked about that because that was definitely a big part of my journey with food too. Was like, I, in the past, like really struggled with essentially like eating for my emotions more than eating for my body. Like,
Mhm.
which I guess a lot of people call like emotional eating. Like I was more like, how can I how can I eat something to feel a certain way emotionally? And now the way that I think about it, and I think I was like kind of like thinking of like, oh, this is maybe the best like nugget I can give in response to your question is now like the shift I've made is instead of thinking about like what do I desire on the surface in this moment, I kind of think about what how do I desire to feel like after I eat? How do I desire to feel throughout my day? How do I desire to feel, tomorrow or the rest of this week? And generally for me that is different than the surface level like because I mean, sugar is totally my kryptonite too. So it's like my answer when I ask that is usually different than sugar. Or trick that I use is if I'm craving something like sugar, I'll ask myself like, well, I'll know that it's usually probably connected to like I'm either hungry and I actually like need a meal, or
Mhm.
I'm thirsty. Those are generally the two things, or I have an emotional need to
An
address.
emotion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I love the balance you bring to that because, you know, sometimes the coffee cake is the thing. Like,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think that there is this like that this deeper work of like it's got nothing to do with diet culture. It's got nothing to do with looking a certain way. It's actually about like feeling a certain way. And
Yeah.
my work is so much about reconnecting to your intuition and reconnecting to your body moment to moment and its truest desires. And so when I bring that lens to it, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like it's about actually like honoring like how your body wants to feel. Um,
Yeah.
and then when I think of it like that, it's not like punitive, it's not like anything like that. It's actually like the most loving, reverent thing you can do is to go a little bit deeper. Is what I'm hearing you say. It's like go a little bit deeper and just get curious. Um,
Mhm.
is this an emotional need? Is this a physical need? And also holding that perspective of like, how do I want to feel? Uh,
Yeah.
and sometimes I want to feel like I've just eaten a huge slice of coffee cake.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Ex-
But yeah.
I I am so about that because I don't believe in deprivation of any kind. Like when it comes to food. Like I said, for me, it's never about diet culture. It's not about restricting. It's not about eating a certain way. And it's definitely not about like getting it perfect. Like I think the other piece of like advice I would share about kind of your last question, like intuitive eating is also about experimentation and like learning moment to moment, meal by meal, like what does sit well with you? Like, how does that thing make you feel? And also, that piece of coffee cake might make you feel amazing one day and like not so great another day. And that's okay too. It's all a giant like experiment that we're doing with our bodies all the time and with our emotions and all of that. So I think it's really like taking that judgment away too. If you like quote unquote feel like you mess up, like if you ate the coffee cake and then you didn't feel good, it's like let's not add beating ourselves up on top of that. Like let's just be like that wasn't what my body really wanted today. Now I'm
Information.
it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And I I am so all for like I even wrote a post about this the other day like when I ordered a strawberry shortcake, because it was like just I whole body yes, that was what I wanted in that moment, and it blew my mind. Like it was the best strawberry shortcake I've probably ever had, and I enjoyed it so deeply. And so I do absolutely believe that there is a place in our lives for sure, for like those indulgent moments, and it's just about like I know that when I listen to like what my true desire is, I actually get so much more enjoyment about over I get so much more enjoyment from whatever is in it, whether it's a big salad or whether it's the strawberry shortcake, it's like if I'm following my true desire, I get more out of it. I feel better on the other side of it. I feel way better eating the strawberry shortcake than forcing myself to eat a salad and then being like hangry and upset that I forced myself a salad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I just love them, like the freedom and the permission that I feel this conversation is giving me, and and everyone who's listening, and just the way you approach this whole process of it's not even a process, like this part of life, the way you approach this part of life of cooking and eating, and just yeah, the permission and the invitation to experiment. I think that's really exciting. Yeah, I can feel myself being like, ooh, maybe I should go to the shop and like look at the vegetables instead of just being like, what can I order tonight? Yeah, so thank you for bringing that and just like opening up that. I think for many people who are listening, and but I can certainly speak for myself. And so I would actually love to ask you about what you are currently offering and how people can work with you, because I'm sure many people are like, oh my God, how do I get more of this? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for asking. I'm actually so genuinely like beyond excited about what I'm offering right now, and this like organically slash magically and miraculously like came out. So I have this upcoming year-long program called JoyFull Food. We're officially starting August 1st, but I'm like sneaking people in now slash like through July, and anyone who joins in July gets basically like a bonus month. And JoyFull Food is honestly like about everything that we talked about today. It's like deprogramming your relationship to food and to cooking, and bringing it back to ease, bringing it back to joy and to pleasure, and really using your whole experience with food, with cooking, as just a portal into expanding the joy and the enjoyment in your life, to expand the self-love that you give to yourself, expanding the way that you care for yourself, and just really deeply nourishing yourself on like a whole new level. And I don't even call it a program. I've been playing around with calling it like a deprogram or a reprogram. I don't even need to necessarily have a name, but it's more about us all gathering in community, having fun with food, like like getting rid of limiting beliefs that we have about food or cooking or our bodies, and just coming to this really pure place of like loving food, loving cooking when we choose to do it, and loving our bodies through that process. And so in JoyFull Food, it's going to be like this mix of sharing. I'm going to have like a monthly theme, whether it's something on like cooking for your family, or intuitive eating is definitely going to be one of them, or like food as self-love. I'm going to definitely do one around like food for your body and like how you nourish your body, like, and that intuitive piece that we talked about too. So there's going to be a monthly theme each month. There's, with that theme, I'm going to like share and sort of riff on the topic like we've been doing today, and just like really talk about my perspective and how to come to that place of like freedom in that relationship with whether it's self-love or your body or food. And there's going to be like a workbook that's going to have like those recipes that you can play around with. That's going to have different like reflection invitations. That's going to have tips for bringing in the bringing in the pleasure, bringing in the enjoyment. And one of the things I'm most excited about is that each month we're going to have a community cook along where we're going to gather together on Zoom to either people can cook the dish of like one of the recipes that I'll be cooking, or they can literally just hop on, cook whatever they want. You could just like be eating your meal with us. You could be doing none of the above, but it's a chance to just be in community and like be in the vibes of how cooking can be fun and playful and easeful and playful, and doing it together and celebrating whatever we create. Or if we create nothing, we just show up and like be in that energy. But so much of like this whole experience is just going to be like giving ourselves a giant permission slip to return to food and cooking as like something we do for ourselves, some way that we honor our bodies, a way that we bring more pleasure into every day, because there's like generally like for most people 3 core times that you're eating. So like how can we make that just like a moment to tap into that pleasure more deeply? And there's gonna be I'm calling it like a virtual soiree every month where I'm just going to be there to coach people, answer anyone's questions, and to really help people work through any blocks that they have around cooking or around food or around their bodies and their relationship to food, so we can really just like untangle it. And I was playing with my coach when we were like framing this up of like, this isn't like, people can literally join JoyFull Food and do nothing but just be in the container if they want to. And like, you will transform just by like being in the vibes, being in the energy, just like getting this whole fresh perspective on food, on cooking, on how it's this like portal to deeper pleasure. And so there's really like, it's going to be the easiest program anyone's ever done. You don't actually have to do anything you don't want to. It's like all about permission, all about freedom, all about pleasure, finding that ease and coming out on the other side with this just like totally beautiful relationship to food, relationship to like how food relates to you, how you relate to cooking. Even if you never cook, just like seeing it in a different lens, like yeah, it's just gonna be this like lovely year-long like soaking and the energy that I have around food and my perspective and like the ways that I make it art and beauty in my own life. And I haven't officially announced it anywhere else, but like it's gonna be like insane. Like I like to think I'm making it insanely accessible. So when people join between now and August 1st, which is our official start date, it's only $111 a month for the year, or it's 12, I think 12.22 if you pay full. And after August 1st, then it goes up to $1,600 paying full or $150 a month. But it's still just like a whole year for like $1,600 if you don't want to get on the pre-party pricing. But obviously I invite you in now. And but I truly would be so honored and delighted and excited to have anyone who wants to kind of go deeper with everything we talked about today and this experience of food and cooking and really just expanding pleasure in their lives through that portal. So I'm clearly really excited about it. I could talk about it for a while.
Oh, no, it sounds delicious. So delicious and delightful. And I think when you said like, you don't have to do anything and you can just come be in the vibes and you will transform. I would say that this conversation has been transformational for me already. Just this one conversation about this topic, and I can only imagine that being in that energy and having all the other things that you're going to be deliciously creating will truly be like a life-changing experience and will reshape your relationship to food and cooking. There's just no way that it wouldn't. So I just love that you've created this, and I can feel like that it's coming from your truest essence, like from your heart. I would probably say from your pussy. Like, it's like, yes, like, let's go. Like, this is the thing that you were made to create. So I'm just so excited for everyone who's going to get in on this and going to get to experience this for the next year. So where can people find the details? Where can they sign up?
Yeah, perfect. So right now, I currently have the wait list open, and all that means is that you're going to be the first to find out when it's like the doors are fully open. You're going to be the first to get access to that special pre-party pricing and all the bonuses that are going to happen in July. And so they can go to my website. So it's haleyreese.com, which I know Haley's spelled 1,000 different ways. So for people listening, it's www.haleyreese.com/joyfull, which is spelled JoyFull, like the cute play being full. So haleyreese.com/joyfull. That's where they can get on the wait list. Probably within the next like week, I'll have like the starter sales page up there that they can see a lot more juicy details. But when you sign up on the wait list too, like you put your name in, it just shows you the little pretty like placeholder page I have right there now, but you put your name in, and it, once you submit it, it opens up this whole like PDF like interactive brochure thing I made that kind of gives you like the essence of the program, exactly what you're going to be receiving. So it's just like a full preview of exactly what JoyFull Food is all about. So you get that when you sign up on the wait list as well, to like really see a lot more details, right?
To whet your appetite. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Okay, perfect. And of course, like, I will also link you in this on Instagram and on Facebook. So I'm sure if people can't find it, they can just come directly to you and you will direct them.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone has questions about like what you and I talked about today and wants to just like chat about it, like please feel free to DM me. Don't be a stranger. I love having these conversations. So I welcome that as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Haley. I love this conversation. And I'm just so excited to see where this program is going to take people and really start to reshape our experiences with food and truly be that portal to more pleasure in another area of our life that perhaps, like me, you haven't really thought about before. So, yeah, thank you for sharing your brilliance. And, yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank you. I so appreciate on today. I think it's morning for you, but night for me. So it has just been a joy, and I really appreciate just the beautiful questions that you asked, and to get to share about this with your audience and like this beautiful series of pleasure and that you're doing. It's just so amazing, inspiring, and I just adore you. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, I just want everyone to have more pleasure in their lives. I'm like, that's my job. Like, that's what I came here to do. Just, you have pleasure, you have pleasure, you have pleasure. Oh, okay. Mwah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.